Hey, everybody. I see lots of people jumping on, so we'll give everyone a few minutes to get logged in and before we get going today. Now, Beth, you're in New York City?
Yes, I am. And as I as I just noted to you, dealing with construction on the apartment next door. So there's nothing really I could do about that other than try to move around. So it's not, of course, it started this morning just a little while ago. So I have hopefully found a quiet spot.
You know what? That's kind of the fun thing about all these Zooms and live presentations is we get to meet everyone's kids, pets.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
you know, in your case, we'll get to hear your neighbors.
Hear the banging, yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Actually, it's, you know, it's a fun, you know, plus of all these Zooms is you do get a peek into everyone's kind of personal life, and it's endearing. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, it's been just great to see, you know, the other side of our colleagues and the people that we, you know, we love, get them at home.
Exactly.
It's fun. But hopefully we'll all be in person soon, or at least, I don't know, coming months.
Yeah, hopefully. I was thinking a lot this past week about the event that the Babe event that you held at Nordstrom, which was, I think it was on the 11th. And on that day last week, I kept thinking about how that was, you know, everybody's got those milestones. That was the last in-person event. And
it was. And, you know, when we went home from that event, you know, which was, yeah, this group of women on Nordstrom's shoe floor. And, you know, we're surrounded by beautiful product and everybody was a little hesitant, but, you know, never did we think that a year would go by without, you know, being able to get back together again. So we definitely are looking forward to that. But in the meantime, we've been doing lots and lots of webinars and, you know, for everybody who's already logged on, you know, we're just so fortunate to have this wonderful ongoing relationship with the NPD group and have Beth present to us today. This information is valuable and it's the kind of, you know, little gems that will help you, you know, think about your business in a different way and hopefully give you some ideas for, you know, what's coming up for the future. So we're always excited about that. And what I'm really excited about too is in our next issue of Accessories Magazine, which will be out the first week of April. So, you know, look for it. We'll be sending you an email with the link. I'll give a little sneak peek because I saw a little bit of it today. Wow, the information that you have prepared for us and for our readers. The NPD team, you've been working very hard.
yeah,
Definitely working hard. So you're going to want to open that up. You're going to definitely want to find the pages that Beth and their team have shared for even more insights as to what's happening and video links as to what's happening. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, it should be great.
We also have a couple other events coming up before Beth gets started. Next week, we have part 2 of Jessica Richards' presentation on spring 2022. This one's going to really focus in on the items that you should have in your assortment. We're also hosting an event, a 3-day fair with, we'll call it the softer side of our India manufacturers. And the cool thing is they've limited to only 20 factories. Those factories do anything from apparel, soft accessories, embroidery to home goods, which, you know, so many of us have expanded into those categories. We know it's a hot category. So if you're thinking of resources, could be anything from bed, bath to, you know, pretty much you name it, pillows, carpets, cushions, they've got it. And they've also set up a really easy to navigate system. So when we send the recap of this out to everyone, we'll also send the link to register. Hopefully you'll get to take a peek. And if you have a specific thing you're looking for, you can reach out to me or my team. I'll put my email in the chat box and let us know and we'll connect you just with 1 or 2 factories that can take care of that for you. I hope that everybody can hear me. If you can hear me, can you just chat? I know, Beth, you're shaking your head. Yes, hopefully everyone else can, because I'm getting a couple comments that say the host hasn't joined. Okay, thank you.
Yeses.
I'm glad you can hear me. Zoom's acting a little funny today, so we appreciate you hanging out with us. Okay, so we're going to present with Beth Goldstein, Accessory Council board member, analyst for accessories and footwear for the NPD group. And what I'm going to ask everyone to do is put your questions into the chat. And when Beth is done, I will ask her your questions. If there's general themes to the questions, I'll try to pull it together. And we welcome you and look forward to seeing everybody in person. And Beth, can't wait to hear what you have to share.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the intro. I will share my screen. Give me a second. Share. We'll go into presentation mode, and you should be seeing the intro slide. So if you don't, let me know, but I think we should be good. So thank you, everybody. Excited to be here to present the industry year in review and the look ahead, as we embark upon that road to recovery. For those of you who don't know me, here is a little bit about me. As Karen mentioned, I'm a member of the Accessories Council Board of Directors, so really enjoyed being involved there. I've got about 20 years expertise in the industry. Prior to coming to NPD, after college, I went through Lord & Taylor's executive training program, and then I worked at Saks Fifth Avenue for a couple of years before going back to school. So a lot has changed in that retail space since I've been there. It's like a roller coaster. So Lord & Taylor went out of business. Now they're, coming back in an online fashion, potentially going to open stores again. So it's really just been fascinating to follow. So please look me up on LinkedIn if we're not connected. Would love to. And then if you use Twitter, please feel free to follow me. Just very quickly, as a introduction to NPD, if you're not familiar, we're a global market insights firm. We track about 20 industries in 19 countries. What we track globally varies by the type of our client base and the local retail landscapes. For fashion, we mostly track in the US and Canada, and we've got 3 main sources of information. One is point of sale data from the retailers, and another is consumer surveys. And then also we've got a newer service which tracks consumer receipts. They submit online and in-store receipts to us so that we can extract the actual purchase information and make a lot of really gather a lot of insights from that, and that's longitudinal. Obviously, we don't know what one consumer is up to, but we can track shifts in shopping behavior over time with that service. But essentially, the crux of our business is combining all that data, all of the industry expertise that we've got in the various industries, and the analytics to help our clients grow their businesses. And as Karen mentioned, coming soon, the annual industry report. It's going to be this year. We've got the opportunity to publish it in the newly launched AC magazine. In the past couple of years, it's been more of a standalone product, but you'll see the spread in the magazine, and then you'll be able to link to the full content. So just a couple of highlights there. We'll go through. There'll be data and insights, and some of that you will see today on the state of the accessories industry. We'll talk about the learnings we've had from all of the industries we track over this past year. What are the key themes and trends we're watching? And then we'll have some special features like the industry outlook from our chief analysts, Don Unser and Marshall Cohen. And there'll also be some video content. So it'll be really interesting and nice, more interactive. And then the agenda for today, which I'm about to get into, will really follow that flow. So this will be really like a preview to that report, and you'll find more information in the report when you get the magazine. But we'll cover what's going on across industries. We'll look at the state of the accessories industry, and then we'll look at those key themes that I mentioned and what that means for looking ahead to recovery, as we can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. So let's get going. So the retail trends across industries, very quickly, my daughter got this fortune in her cookie about a month or so ago, and I thought it was very apropos. It really summed up for me what we have felt in our industry during this past year, during the pandemic. People really, they spent a lot of money, and you're going to see that in the next few slides, but the categories they spent it on shift dramatically because they were looking to buy categories that were going to enhance their new lifestyles, which were mostly home-based lifestyles. So unfortunately, accessories, footwear, apparel really struggled, other than the various bright spots that supported those lifestyles. And a lot of the discounting that we did, in this industry really didn't help that much because it was really so need-based. Here's a picture of that past year. A lot of ups and downs, but we really are just at that year mark. And it's really in the next week or so when we get our data back that it's going to be very telling, because you can see mid to late March last year where the bottom essentially fell out of retail and then started to slowly climb back up as stimulus checks were disseminated, and that really took place through June. And then, of course, we had another boost of that early this year. One second. Sorry, I just wanted to check. Okay, comments, thought there was something there. Okay. And so it's really just been a lot of ups and downs. So early on, we were able to mobilize and release data weekly to stay on top of all of these inflection points. So you see there are key shopping periods like back to school, which is that August timeframe in the middle where the units dipped, but dollars stayed up. And that is a theme that we have seen throughout the year. And you can see those times when dollars have pulled away from units. And we're pretty much in one starting the beginning of this year as stimulus came through. And even in the last week, dollars are increasing, but units are declining as consumers are buying fewer items, and compared now to the stocking up behavior that you see about a year ago, but they're buying higher price categories to support those lifestyles. And we have seen that across many of our industries. So not only are they shifting to higher price industries like things for the home and technology, within each of those industries, they're shifting to higher priced product. And we see that in footwear, and we're seeing it in accessories as well. So again, here's just this overall view. You can see after that red line is holiday. So a lot of ups and downs there. That early blue spike is Prime Day. Really didn't impact our industries, but it really did take away from the key Black Friday weekend. And then you see it dipping again, but then getting a little bit better later in the holiday. And then early this year has been strong, but we're about to start anniversarying. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And of course, we're looking at that light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine rollout that may just be easing consumer concerns. And then as we will watch, because as we watched the past couple of times, what happens with the new stimulus. In the past few stimulus rounds, our industries haven't really benefited. The sneaker category is a little bit, but that's really been the only thing. But this could be a little bit different as we are heading into spring. We are heading into a time where we can see ourselves getting back out there due to the quickening vaccine rollout. So we just have to keep watching, and we'll keep you up to date on that. So here is the picture of those industries, and you can see those trends really clearly here. And this, I think, is my fourth webinar for the Accessories Council, basically since the pandemic began, and the story has not changed. What consumers have spent money on are those categories on the left, and what they have not spent money on are the categories on the right. Unfortunately, those are the ones that we play in for the most part here. But so much about our lives at home and keeping the kids busy and streaming video content and outfitting our home gyms and our home offices and our entertainment setups. So it's really been all about our lifestyles that are close to home. And then we just didn't have the demand for the categories, the footwear, the accessories, the apparel, and the beauty, because we just weren't going anywhere. Now, that's not to say there are not bright spots within those areas, and we're going to talk about those. And the other thing to keep in mind, which is a good sign for what's to come, is the fact that consumers have saved so much money. Those that were not as impacted financially have saved a lot of money on areas that they might have spent: vacations, going to events and concerts, the gym membership, going out to eat. And these have ebbed and flowed a little bit. Like dining out will be reliant on local guidance, and that has changed as cases have risen and fallen in various areas. So we are looking to potentially start to see these types of things spend here start to pick up, which may be not great for some of those industries that have done so well because of the home lifestyle, but it's what we really need. We need consumers to spend on these types of things so that they buy the products to accompany them on these experiences. So let's jump into the state of the industry. And this is how those of you that work with us on a regular basis know how we track the industries. So this is kind of a combination of a number of different industries that we've compiled together to represent accessories. And this is how it's defined in the report that will be in AC Magazine. So footwear, jewelry, bags, and you can see down the row there. Now, we saw no growth in any of these industries as a whole over the past year. Footwear is by far the biggest of this set of industries. But you can see that the hardest hit ones are the biggest ones on the top, and then a couple of the smaller ones like luggage down toward the bottom. So we'll talk about that as well as we move forward, but that's not going to be surprising. But also I think luggage has one of the biggest opportunities for recovery over the next year or so. So footwear, overall challenge, but I'll show you some of what did well there. Jewelry had a tough year, but turned it around a bit at holiday, and bags as well. And we'll talk about more of these categories in depth as we move through. So I mentioned jewelry. Now, all throughout the year, we did see that the higher end jewelry was outperforming, perhaps because it's a great Zoom accessory and perhaps because it's an investment purchase. And you saw earlier that those, maybe perhaps not spending on some of those other categories led consumers to spend in areas where they felt it was good investments. But we did see jewelry pick up around holidays. So it really did make its mark for gifting, but it also was a lot about self-gifting this year. And this is something we talk about every year at holiday, but it really stood out this year for jewelry. About 2/3 of the sales, according to consumers that we survey, bought jewelry as a self-gift. And so maybe that was a great reward after a very tough year. So this is definitely something to keep a watch on. And, it's really a great marketing message as well. As we look, this is very high level, but it's really just to give you an idea of where we are in terms of consumer groups and the generational breakouts. So we've got Gen Z, we've got it broken out here. I think 0 to 14 will ultimately be called something else eventually, but we merge it in with Gen Z right now. But it's really the growth and the increases here in share have come from that older Gen Z. So Gen Z now making up about 30% of the market. The bulk of that, 2/3 of that, is coming from the 15 to 23. And that gained a little over a share point compared to other generations. Millennials still the largest, but Gen Z is gaining. Gen Z gaining a little bit of share, and boomers losing. So I think, obviously with older consumers, they were the most at risk from the virus. They really were ones that had to stay at home. We'll show you something interesting about their purchasing habits in a little while when we get into the online section. But e-commerce grew across all of those generations, particularly across boomers. But I think we need to keep an eye on those boomers for the next few months as vaccinations have spread across that age group, and consumers are looking to get back to those activities that they were doing and traveling. And this is a group that, they're younger than we may have thought of in the past. They're active, and this is a group we need to watch. Okay, so that's just some of the stats to set this up. But let's get into some of these key trends that we're watching. And again, these are the themes that you're going to see covered in the report as well. So the evolution of e-commerce. We show this to you often when we do presentations, whether it's these webinars or in the business workshop, just as we're keeping pulse. And you can see the penetration of all of the different industries that we track. They're kind of color coded by industry grouping. So the blue are what we call our soft lines categories. And these have increased a lot since the last time we would have shown you this, this slide. And you can see those increases. So this is the percentage of sales that are generated online. And you can see the highest is small appliances, technology, tech, so consumer technology, and then followed by small appliances. And these increases are increases that we have never seen before. Usually when we show this slide, you're looking at 1-point increases, 2-point increases, maybe 3 across the various categories as they slowly grow their e-commerce penetration. But this year has really accelerated that. And you can see footwear grew 12 points in terms of e-commerce penetration from just under 30% now to over 40%. Similar numbers in some of the other categories as well. Accessories is into the 30s. In accessories, the highest penetration is in watches and small personal accessories, which is like small leather goods, at 40% or higher. And the lowest is jewelry at under 30%. But jewelry, along with other accessories and footwear categories, grew significantly this year. So we're looking at these numbers starting to come down as consumers get back out into stores a bit, but we do not expect them to come down to pre-pandemic levels at all. So this is sort of a new reset for e-commerce as we move forward. And when we look at the channels that drove the online business, the most likely channels to grow, and a lot driven by their online piece of things, is in accessories, it's more of the specialty retailers. You see the online pure play, so clearly that's online. Mass merchants, they remained open as essential retailers, but grew their online businesses as well. And then home shopping is an area that is really interesting. And whenever QVC, HSN, or the other platforms there feature an item, they sell through a lot of units. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. No one does it better in terms of showcasing product online and in video format. And this is something that retailers, other types of retailers, really need to pay attention to as they look to enhance their online business moving forward. Just the imagery, and really focus on the features of the items. That is something that the home shopping networks, or QVC, does really well. In footwear, you see online as well. You see anything related to athletic, because the athleisure category was strong as well. Didn't grow overall, but there were a lot of product launches. If you follow sneaker releases like Jordan and Air Force One, there was a lot of that going on, and consumers snapped them up. So retailers like Foot Locker really benefited there. Branded shoe stores, so that's their own retail. So that was mostly athletic driven as well, but not necessarily. And then sporting goods stores. So again, some sporting goods stores were able to stay open and were deemed essential. So that helped, but also a retailer like Dick's, which did not remain open, but really pivoted very quickly to link the offline and the online, offering curbside pickup. And because it was that sporting goods business was so strong, those types of retailers really benefited as well. And here's what I mentioned earlier. Consumers age 65 plus showed the most gains online in 2020. They're not the largest segment when you look at online sales, but their online spend grew 60% in 2020 versus the prior year. Their purchase frequency, they made an average of 62 online purchases in 2020. That was up over 50% versus the prior year. And then the percent of purchases that they made online grew by 6 points. So they made 16% of their purchases online in 2020, up from 10% the prior year. So this was driven by need. Because older consumers that were at the most risk really had to get on board with online purchasing, and they did, and we expect this to stick. So moving into the comfort category, and this is not going to be a surprise to anyone professionally or personally, I think. Some of the strongest categories that we saw across the apparel, footwear, accessories, and beauty categories are listed here, and probably you can relate from your personal experience. And there is other industries here. I mean, if you look at home massaging appliances, in books, print books grew as well as people cozied up at home, to read. And so, we're able to have more time to spend on those types of things. So it really tells a story of how important comfort was. And we need to consider this as we start to slowly move outside the home, how we carry those elements through. In footwear, you see some of the strongest categories here. Not surprisingly, slippers, but the slippers category is evolving, and we'll talk about that as well. Mule clog here is essentially all about Crocs. So no secret how strong Crocs has been, really strong pandemic footwear, and then also just fun and easy and comfortable, and has really continued to do well. Their momentum that they were carrying coming into the pandemic carried all the way through. Very functional footwear as well, so work safety. So for essential workers, driven by necessity here. Sport slides were the extension to slippers, very comfortable, easy on, easy off, indoor, outdoor, just perfect for hanging around at home. And you may be surprised to see hunting and fishing on the list, probably not a category we talk about early and often, but it's a small category, and it clearly benefited from consumers' interest in outdoor activities. Other categories that performed well in footwear, really stronger the second half of the year, were running and hiking, again, because people were getting outside looking for outdoor activities and socially distant fitness activities. At the other end of the spectrum, not surprisingly, are the fashion categories. So strappy sandals, booties, pumps for women, and really the driver loafer Oxford categories for men. And you're not going to be surprised at this. And when even within these categories, when they were more dress oriented, they performed worse, and more casual oriented performed a little bit better. And the categories on the bottom really took a hit also in terms of average prices, as there was a lot of discounting going on. And the categories on the top really didn't, because these were in demand and consumers wanted them. This leads me to one of the hottest topics, and one that is coming up a lot in the questions that I'm getting recently, is the fate of the dress category in footwear. What this shows you, and what we need to remember, is that this is not a sudden trend. The decline of dress footwear is not something that just happened this past year. It accelerated this past year, but it's been ongoing for a number of years. And if we take a step back, we know that the fashion category in footwear overall is losing ground to athleisure. And then within fashion, dress has been losing ground to casual. So there have been bright spots in casual in particular, like I just talked about, slippers, Crocs, other types of very comfort-oriented slides. We talk a lot about Birkenstock has done very well. But the dress category has been pretty devastated this year. So I get asked about whether it'll come back. And like I said, it was already really struggling. Now, I do believe that as we get back to work and social events, it will have a boost. There will be a boost, but there's no reason to believe it will bounce all the way back. We'll always have a dress business, but it will be a smaller piece of the total. And we've seen that society will continue on the path of casualization and prioritizing comfort. So it will just represent an increasingly smaller percent of the market. So those that are in this space really need to be prepared to capitalize on the boost that is to come, but it's important to focus on what's really going to drive the business. And those are the more casual categories, maybe seasonal sandals, some more of the fashion sneakers that didn't do as well this year because people just weren't going out. And as people get back out to activities and social gatherings, those are the types of categories that are going to drive the market. So we just have to be careful not to overreact or overcorrect to what we see happening more in the short term. We also know that consumers have told us that they plan to dress either as casually or more casually compared to prior to the pandemic. So when we did this survey back in September, 20% of consumers said they plan to dress more casually coming out of the pandemic, and half of them said they plan to dress as casually. But what was interesting is that more casually was actually even higher for those with higher level incomes. And there could be a few reasons for this. We have seen higher income consumers really spending a lot on their athleisure wardrobes. Also, maybe these are consumers that are more locally likely to have more flexible lifestyles as they come out of the pandemic and work from home a bit more. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I did want to talk about slippers because it's a fun category. And what's next for the slipper category? Strong growth this year. It slowed down a little bit later in the year as, obviously holiday is a big time for slippers. So when we compared this past holiday to the prior holiday, we had growth of about 20 to 30%, depending on how we look at it. But earlier in the year, we had seen increases of about 100%. And we're back to seeing those types of increases early this year before we start to anniversary last year's increases. So it's still a small category overall, but there's still a lot of opportunity. And I think a lot of that opportunity is going to come from outside of what we might have historically called a slipper. There's going to be many new entrants into this space, and we already see it, many fashion brands entering the space, many new categories emerging, and we don't even yet know what to call these categories, but they're hybrids of basically all of the footwear categories: indoor, outdoor, easy on, easy off, very casual, and then just new uses. Of course, I'm not going to say that no one ever wore a Birkenstock inside before prior to the pandemic, but it's the way that now we started to think about some of our footwear that was predominantly used outdoor really sort of came into the house to be used more as house shoes. So I do think there's opportunity. Growth will slow, but the growth will come from a combination of these factors. So now on to bags, from slippers to bags. And I think I've shown you this slide before, that consumers have really started to look at the bags that they carry as solutions for their everyday problems, looking for versatility, for comfort, for function, for convenience, needing to carry everything. And we need to think about how this moves forward. Of course, travel, I note there, has obviously been very challenged this year, and we will talk about that in a little bit, but it will come back, and consumers will be carrying things differently. If we are doing more hybrid work from home, work in the office types of situations, we mean carrying our technology and all our cords and all our accessories back and forth more than we used to. So it's important that our bags address this. We have seen during the pandemic or the past year that the smaller size bags have gained share because people were kind of running out maybe for activities a little bit closer to home, not needing to carry as much. Our phones are increasingly becoming our wallets more anyway. So we saw Mini actually grow, still a very small percentage of sales, but it grew in terms of dollar volume in addition to gaining share. The biggest category remains the small handbag size, and that gained share versus last year. And really that came from the medium size, so bigger handbags that we would use for work. Large was flat last year in terms of share, represents about 20% of the business, but had already lost about 5 points of share in 2019. So we had already again been seeing this trend towards more smaller bags. And like I said, as work activities start to come back, we'll start to see some improvement in some of these categories. But again, I think the growth will be driven by the easier, the hands-free, the bags we can take on all of those events that we're going to start to be going to. And those of you that saw Jessica's presentation a couple of weeks ago will recognize some of these silhouettes. These are the much more functional silhouettes that we're starting to see emerge, different types of crossbodies that can be worn different ways, much more utilitarian. A few years ago, I don't think anybody would have carried their water bottle in a crossbody like that. But now we've got, brands from designer brands to bridge and better brands and more fashion oriented brands making these types of products. So really playing up the actual function of the item. And then, minis and add-ons, so accessories for your accessories. We're carrying masks, we're carrying sanitizer, but maybe we don't want, to carry as much all at one time. So there's these little add-ons or multiple piece bags that we're starting to see that address some of these issues. So super functional, and even, and sometimes in some cases, super tiny. And the idea of pent-up demand is something that we are hearing a lot about lately. And I think this concept presents the opportunity for our industry, because there will be a lot of pent-up demand over the next couple of months that consumers are getting out there to look to get out there and spend. But we have a big hill to climb. If we look, this is fashion footwear, so non-performance, but fashion footwear and accessories dollar volume together over the past few years, you can see how far it dropped this year. An $18.4 billion loss. That's 16%. Units actually dropped a little bit more, and that goes back to some of the talk about how we have seen average prices increase, particularly in footwear, as consumers have gravitated more toward athleisure, which carries higher price points than fashion. I mentioned it in terms of jewelry. We've seen it in terms of luggage, even though luggage was a struggling category this year. So we now will start to go up from this, but it will be a big hill to climb. And we've got some of the hardest hit categories poised for some recovery. I've already addressed dress footwear, luggage, handbags, and then makeup in the beauty space. So here are the categories that we're looking to see recovery on, but we really have to follow, because as I mentioned, I don't believe that the dress footwear recovery will be long-term. I think it will rebound, but remain challenged. Luggage, I think, has more of an opportunity as we get back to travel. Handbags will see some growth, but I think the nature of what we're carrying will change, as I mentioned. And then as we get back out there, hopefully the makeup business will start to improve. If we look at travel, and this is not going to be surprising to anybody, I was essentially able to, or although maybe it will be surprising how closely the luggage sales align with the airline passenger counts. So, we can see the same types of patterns. In the sales, you see some spikes, which is the shifting of the Prime days and holidays. But, you can see that in 2020, we were well below 2019 levels, and the pattern really followed the same, dipped to the lowest levels in late March, April, and then started to slowly improve. And this is something that I'm now following, will continue to follow as we head into 2020, and travel seems to be poised for a comeback. What we've seen this year, though, is that brands that have historically focused on luggage have really focused on other categories, more for overnight or for day-to-day. And I don't think this is going to change, because the focus may shift back towards luggage a bit, but we also know that luggage is not a very high frequency purchase category. Consumers purchase new suitcase on average every 8.5 to 10 years, according to some research that we did about 1.5 years ago. So, this makes sense that in order to grow, brands need to focus on peripheral categories as well. And there's a lot out there really trying to tap into the aspiration of travel. And we saw this over the holidays, even though we were a little bit far from the return, looking for future travel, very aspirational, offering promotions, buy now, travel later. So we'll continue to likely see this as travel starts to pick up and brands have opportunity to capitalize. And we very recently asked consumers when they expect their travel to return to pre-pandemic levels. And we asked that for both leisure and business travel. And you can see some differences, but overall the arc was the same. 40% of consumers expect to return to both types of travel within 6 months. Most believe that their pre-pandemic travel behavior will return in some respect. And more consumers think that their leisure travel will return than their business travel, which I think is not surprising. I think we all believe that we will probably do less travel for business as we have become so adept at remote meetings, remote presentations, conversations, and being very productive at it. Half of those aged 35 to 44 expect to return to their pre-pandemic leisure travel within 6 months. So this is coming from younger consumers, more that millennial age group. It was interesting that older consumers, who we might have expected to say that they're going to return to travel sooner because they're more likely to be vaccinated, they were a little bit later on their opinion. So 35 of them said 7 to 12 months. So just some interesting trends, but I think the point is that it's going to be a gradual return to travel. It's not going to just hit at one, month, let's say a couple months from now, all of a sudden everybody's traveling again. What we see from this is that consumers were sort of very spread out in their opinions on when they're going to return to travel, which I think presents some nice continued opportunity for the industry. Backpacks is another area. This is just a snapshot from last year back to school, and we can just see how poor the sales were and how, we just did not have a peak. First of all, Amazon Prime Day was moved later, and we typically see the kickoff to back to school at Amazon Prime Day. So a couple things have to come together to make the season better, but I think we believe, we certainly don't know for sure, but that kids will go back to school in more mass in person this year, and therefore there is opportunity to recoup some of these sales from last year. So this is another category where there will likely be some pent-up demand. So a couple other thoughts as we look ahead to recovery and things that we're watching, because things that happen with consumers and the events and that they start to go back to will have impact on our industries. So work is one of them. And we are tracking through our innovation lab using GPS data, consumers or people returning to their workplace. And if you take a look at early or late March last year, this was the lowest point. What this bar shows is the percent of people that have returned, percent of people that worked outside the home prior to the pandemic, what percent of them have returned to working outside the home. So it was at its lowest levels early in the pandemic last year, started to increase throughout the year, and in the fall hit kind of a high of almost 60% back to workplaces. There are some low points for holidays where people don't go to their workplaces. And then it dipped a little bit late in the year and started to grow again this year. So now in the latest reading, it is up over maybe about 55% or so. So we're continuing to watch this, and this can include anybody returning to a workplace. So it could have been a retail worker that was furloughed early on and now is returning, or service workers, restaurant workers coming back to work, or someone who lost a job maybe in a retail store and now works in an Amazon warehouse. So there's a lot going in here, but it just helps us understand the cadence of people going back to work. And it also could mean that it's just people going back to an office, but maybe not even full time. It's if they go back to their office even once, twice a week, we'd be picking that up. So it's really important to keep following these trends so that we can see how our industries might evolve. I had overlaid some older data through the end of the year for our categories. And you see that overall throughout the year, they had increased, but it really had leveled out towards the end of the year. And so we really need to see more of a movement in getting back to the workplace. And this was also a question we asked very recently about for those that work at home or can work at home, do consumers anticipate working from home more or less than they did after the pandemic versus how much they worked at home prior to the pandemic? And of those that can or do work from home, about a third said they anticipate working from home more than they did before the pandemic began. And this skews higher for younger age groups and for higher income consumers. And I mentioned that earlier. So we are much likely, other research you see talks about kind of this likely hybrid model moving forward, that workers really are looking for that increased flexibility with their time, and that working remotely has been fairly productive for many employers. So we're likely to see this hybrid model continue. So that's certainly going to impact what we buy moving forward. It may present headwinds for some of the categories we're really looking to turn around, but it'll present continued opportunity for some of the categories that have done well during this time. We also need to remember how hard women have been hit by job losses and financially, and there's a lot of research that has been done on this. Women have lost about 1 million more jobs than men throughout the bulk of the pandemic. And then an additional 2 million more women have taken themselves out of the workplace because they've needed to deal with the childcare, the homeschooling, elder care, perhaps. So it's really been a challenge for women. And there was a stat from December saying that women accounted for all of the job losses. So with such a, the situation is improving, as you can see, but with such a tenuous situation for women, we have to consider how that's going to impact our industry that is so dependent on women to be, healthy financially and going to work. We also need to look regionally. This view is actually just for handbags and for the small personal accessories, but it shows you that the designated market areas, which are sort of the media markets, the ones that have been the hardest hit have been the big urban areas, which are the bulk of the sales, and the ones that have not necessarily grown, but have done better and thus gained share are smaller markets. And there could be a number of reasons for this. Perhaps restrictions not being as strong in some of those places, perhaps due to consumers returning to work at faster rates in some of those places, and also due to consumers moving to some of these places from the larger cities. We've talked a lot about the urban exodus, and it's definitely a real phenomenon, but pendulums tend to swing back. So we really need to be watching that. And, you can just see that for this year, how much those losing shares represent a bigger piece of the market than those gaining shares. So we've got, recovery is dependent on those bigger markets returning. So looking ahead, just a couple of final thoughts here on what we expect. We're expecting the market recoups less than half, and depending on category, could be significantly less than half of the sales that were lost in 2020. It's going to be a slow recovery. We'll see a little bit more of this coming on board in second half, as consumers are likely to be a little bit more able to do activities and gatherings and travel. But there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. E-commerce, we talked about this. We expect that levels of penetration will level off in 2021, but penetration will remain elevated due to pre-pandemic levels. And we've got this cycle here that we expect to see more store closures, and that drives e-commerce growth, but e-commerce growth also drives closures. So there is this cycle that we're watching, but bottom line is that e-commerce and digital will be a bigger piece of the business moving forward. We talked about those comfort categories. So now we need to move that comfort out of the home, back to work potentially, and what we wear to work will evolve along with how we work, like the hybrid models I was just talking about. And I've already seen a number of apparel companies, articles about how they are evolving their offerings to look more like workwear, but feel more like comfort wear. And that'll impact the accessories and the footwear we use as well. Long-term value. While I do think that there will be some freer spending coming on board in the next couple of months, in the long term, consumers will continue to prioritize spending on items that are functional, durable, that offer solutions and solve a problem in their daily lives, and are thus perceived as good investments. And this can come in many forms. It could be because it can carry all their stuff, or because it is there's a sustainability impact, there's a social impact to the brand or retailer, there is something that is appealing about the brand name, the heritage, the history. So there's a lot going on here, but it's all about the investment, the perception of investment and that value. Retail My Way is aligned with that e-commerce point, but this past year, along with the shopping behaviors, consumer expectations have changed as well. Convenience has become key. Brick and mortar went back to becoming more transactional than experiential. And we had spent the last 5 years transforming retail to be more experiential. And that's not to say that the experiences won't come back, but it'll just be different. It will be the experience of shopping. And, you see all these partnerships that are happening now with retailers and brands, or with retailers and retailers like Target and Ulta, or Target and Apple. This is to enhance the consumer experience. It's not necessarily about the types of experiences we've been focused on for the past few years by, putting a coffee bar or a lounge in the store. So the way we're going to think about this is different. But hands down, retail is digital driven in the long term. Even transactions that are completed in store will start off more likely to be digital, but unique opportunities exist in both areas, both online and offline. We can continue to enhance that online experience with bringing the best of the in-store experience with better photography, linking it to inventory, that kind of thing. But also there will be opportunities offline. They'll need to be evaluated and maybe not quite right away, but as consumers start to get back out there, there's going to be so much space available that brands and retailers can take advantage of for little, pop-ups or temporary spaces so that they can reach consumers in new ways without those long-term commitments. And the last thing that is for sure, for many of the things I mentioned today, the pandemic simply accelerated trends that were already in motion. And that will continue to shift. That new normal that we talk about will continue to evolve. So I don't actually love to use that term because I don't think there really is a new normal. And, our normal will continue to evolve. And so brands and retailers need to continue to evolve with it. And those that do will be the ones that that survive and thrive. So thank you very much for joining me today. I will pop this up for just a minute and then I will stop sharing and we can take some questions. I think we've got a few minutes left. So feel free to reach out to Karen, reach out to me directly if you have comments or questions, and I'd love to connect.
Hey, Beth, it's Karen, and now my screen won't share. So
wait, so tell me what you did to make
I made you the host.
Okay, so how do I do that?
Zoom is being a little finicky today.
Yes.
I'm not sure why.
Oh, wait, I have to just find you, right? In participants.
No, I'm a panel.
Okay, yep. So
but while we're figuring this out, here's what I'd love everyone to do. If you can put your yourself into, oh, there I am. If you can put your questions in the chat or in the comment area, we will aim to answer as many of them as possible. So for those who joined late, hopefully you'll also sign up next week. We have a presentation with Jessica Richards on the top items you should have in your assortment for spring 2022. You can go to accessoriescouncil.org to sign up for that. And hopefully you will also sign up for our softer side of things sourcing fair next week. Hey, Beth, question on the future of masks and face coverings.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know that I have a very certain answer here. I think the expectation is that the guidelines will continue to include masks for quite some time. It could be even the balance of this year. But what's interesting is what happens in the long term. Does our behavior change similar to how it already is in some other countries where it's more of a cultural norm to wear masks during certain times, or if you've got the sniffles. So that will be very interesting. So I think that it will remain a viable category, but we really need to stay on top of it to know when we should place a little bit less emphasis on it. So again, it might be a category that kind of sticks around, but obviously becomes a smaller piece of the business. Also think that, in certain times where we may have trekked to work when we weren't feeling our best, with a cold or something, we are unlikely to do so given the fact of how normal working remotely has become. So, that might have been a situation where we might wear one, but, we'll probably stay at home instead.
Yeah, great question. Hey, there's a question about consumers wanting to dress nicer afterwards. Are we going to be so tired of our sweats that we need to start dressing up a little bit more?
Yes, yes and no. So yes, I absolutely think that once we start getting out there, there will be consumers that want to dress up a little nicer. It's just a matter of what does that mean? So to me, that means they're going to start wearing jeans or, maybe other types of more casual types of pants that they might wear to work or, more or events. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're putting on, suits and skirts and all of that. Now there will be some of that, absolutely. So just want to make sure that we're watching the trends and make sure we don't overcorrect for some of these changes that we will see. So I think there will definitely be that portion of the consumer that's out there looking to dress a little bit nicely, but what really are those categories that are going to drive the market, particularly since the dress categories, have become so small over the last couple of years. And it will also be occasion based. So as we, when we can get back to the ACE Awards, we will absolutely, exactly. Consumers are going to potentially want to buy something new for that. So it will be occasion based. It's not going to be a constant type of thing.
Hey, I got a question about name brands versus private label.
That's a really good question. We saw private label, well, depends on who. There are retailers like, look at a Target as an example of best, in class for private label. But in the fashion space, private label has struggled this year, primarily because the brands are more dependent on store traffic and they are less penetrated online and they are more fashion oriented. And none of those things were things that were particularly strong this year. Store traffic was down, more fashion oriented categories were soft because there was limited demand. And there wasn't that presence online to really drive the business. So I think private label continues to be very viable. I think retailers should be doing some rationalization on which private label brands maybe they should keep in the arsenal, maybe ones like I think Kohl's talked about how they're going to sunset a number of brands and focus on some others, some that are private label and some that are more exclusive or national brands. But a private label brand should be treated like any other brand. And again, look to Target for that, for how to do that. It shouldn't matter to the consumer that a brand is sold in one retailer or not. They need to be developed, they need to be marketed and taken care of like any other brand. So I think that's all should be considerations when we look at private label moving forward.
Great. I do have one demographic specific question on dress footwear. Do we see an age that might be more likely to rebound quickly in that?
I'd have to take a deeper look at where things were prior to the pandemic in that category. I mean, I think we'll see improvement across age groups. Probably more likely the strongest rebound will likely be in more younger consumers, that probably Gen Z to millennial space, just based on how they are driving the markets prior to this and during.
Gotcha. How about sustainability? Any trends, anything you're tracking there?
Yeah, so sustainability remains extremely important. We did ask consumers during the past year, is it as important to you as it was prior to the pandemic? Because we knew that consumers might be a little bit more focused on some health and safety issues. And about 40% of consumers said it was as important to them as prior to the pandemic, more or as important. So, and we certainly see that retailers and brands are continuing to make strides there, which is very important because sustainability is not a fad. It is, it is the way of the future. I don't know what the timeline is, but it will be important for really all products to have a reason for being, all brands to be doing good for society. And there's so much information out there now that consumers can become, more education is needed, but we're seeing consumers become more educated on what's going on out there and the impacts on the environment and other social causes of our space. So we're seeing innovation, continued innovation in materials, in recycling, also just in the back end. So it's not just about having an eco-friendly product. It's about a sustainable model for long-term good to society. So, maybe it's that we know that not everything a brand or company is doing, can be the best thing, but it can be offset by other back end like contributions or water conservations or tree planting, that kind of thing. But the hardest part is communicating that, because consumers don't see that on an everyday basis. So super important. It's just, about the communication and the continued education there.
Gotcha. Now there's a question, I'm not sure I completely understand it, but it has to do with the keys to growing an e-commerce business. Now I know you said that e-commerce was, had a nice year by necessity. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and we certainly expect that e-commerce it's sort of at a new level now, and so it'll improve from there at a slower rate because it's grown so aggressively over the last year, and we will see stores pick back up some of that business. But I think that we have to continue to enhance the experience. One of the main reasons consumers like to go into store is to touch and feel product. So how do we make that as the best we can online with photography, with video, with focusing on features? And then it's also about linking it to the offline experience. If you have, the offline, that's not saying that every e-commerce needs to have brick and mortar physical space, but it's a good practice if it makes sense for that business, and it doesn't have to be major stores. It can just be touch points here and there, but it's just that linkage between the two is going to be extremely important. And we saw that this year with all of the enhancements in ordering and pickup options and delivery options. Consumers just basically got used to getting things after initial rough start where it was hard to get products. Once that all kind of leveled off, consumers, their expectations now are to be able to order something and get it however they want, just like that. So there's lots that can be done to continue to enhance that business.
Hey, I know we're afternoon, but we have a few more questions, so hopefully
we're still hanging out.
Okay. Any trends towards consumer loyalty to large established brands versus some of the smaller direct-to-consumer brands?
Yeah, we have seen, particularly in footwear, that consumers have gravitated to the biggest, some of the biggest, most popular brands that have strong heritage, that are trend right. Gender neutral has been a big driver. That's a whole other topic that's important that we've talked about at other times and didn't really cover today. But I don't think that means that consumers aren't interested still in new brands and direct to consumer. Just the business there, we continue to see new brands being launched. There's obviously a reason some of the big retailers are bringing them in and doing partnerships, because consumers are interested in trying new things and the propositions of some of these new brands. So it's really just a balance. And of course, many of the brands themselves are focused on their direct-to-consumer business. So I think there's room for all. It's just a matter of that balance.
Beth, thank you so much. I don't know if you can see, but I am getting texts and emails with great compliments. We really appreciate your time. Again, encourage everyone, as soon as the next issue of the Accessories magazine comes out, dive in for more information from the NPD team, because they've worked so hard to give us this year-end wrap-up. I think you're really going to enjoy that. And, that hopefully you'll enjoy the whole magazine, but I know there's great information there. I can't wait to see everybody. I see all your names there. We miss you. Hopefully we'll be able to see people in person soon. And we'll be in touch, and sign up next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.